Hey everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis, a reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me again, Brittany.
Zach, you found out how much former President Donald Trump has made by not selling his Truth Social stock. But first, bring us back to pre-March of 2024, before Truth Social completed its merger to go public. There were a lot of hiccups along the way, so remind us.
Sure. They had announced that they planned with merging with Digital World Acquisition Corp., which was a blank check company. And yeah, a lot of hiccups along the way. There were investigations for possible insider trading, which I guess I don't need to say possible anymore. They were sentenced last week. There were issues with the accountant that Trump Media hired. No problem of the companies, but it was not their responsibility, but certainly didn't help. And there was also an investigation into whether or not Digital World and Trump Media had talked about merging before they were legally able to have such a conversation. And Digital World agreed to pay a fine to settle that allegation as well.
So now let's talk numbers. How much has the value of Truth fluctuated since it went public in March of 2024 to now?
So that first day, it hit a high of 79.38. At the time, that meant that Donald Trump, who owned 57.3% of the company, was sitting on shares worth about $6.3 billion. It bottomed out in September, where it fell to $11.75 in the middle of a trading day, which wiped $4.9 billion off of his net worth from that high.
But this was certainly a lot of money for him, but he couldn't sell those shares immediately because he was part of a lockup agreement. So can you give us the details into that agreement?
Sure. So Trump and I believe it's 8 other insiders of the company signed lockup agreements in which they promised not to sell the stock unless one of 3 things happened. 1, 6 months passed since the merger went through. 2, there was a sort of transaction where all sorts of any shareholder could turn in their stocks and liquidate it, like if the company had a liquidation or its own merger, subsequent merger. And 3 was depending on the stock price. There were a couple different triggers in there, but if the stock price was above a certain amount, they could sell within around 150 days after the merger went through. And it looks like that is what ended up triggering the Trump's ability to sell his shares. He still hasn't sold any.
And Trump had over 50% of the company's shares. So between when the company went public in March to now, has he acquired more?
Yes, he did. He did not actually pay for them, which seems to be a trend for Donald Trump, acquiring something he didn't necessarily pay for. But there was a trigger in there earlier that if the stock price stayed above a certain level, he would pick up another, I think it was 36 million shares. So he added to his total while he was still in this lockup period.
So Donald Trump wasn't the only one who had a lockup agreement. You mentioned a few other of the employees did. Did anyone who had similar restrictions to Donald Trump sell their shares?
Yes, so there are 5 people who sold their shares according to filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. One of them, Devin Nunes. And the reason they gave for selling their shares, none of them sold all of their shares, they were just partial sales. They said it was to cover tax withholding purposes. So the interesting thing was trying to figure out exactly when Trump's lockup period ended. Those folks all sold it in August 22nd. And it was widely reported that Trump wasn't able to sell it, including by us, until September 20th. So it kind of depends how you read the sentence in there. It was really poorly worded, from this former English major's standpoint, probably from a lawyer, they probably left it. But it does stand to reason that if he had the same agreement that they did, he could have actually sold them in August. We don't know that for sure. I reached out to the Trump Media. They didn't respond to that question. But it seems like he could have possibly sold it there. Either way, August 22nd or September 20th, he has managed to hold on to them and done well by that.
He has been doing well by that. So how much are shares worth now? Remind us of that number. And is there any indication of him planning to sell? Is there any writing on the wall? Has he commented? What do we know on that front?
So as of Friday's close, shares were trading at $29.58. That valued his holdings at $3.4 billion. So significantly more than if he had sold earlier, if he had sold when the other executives had. his entire take would have been $2.6 billion pre-tax. If he'd waited till September 19th, which was the calendar day plus 20 trading days after the merger, he would have taken home just $1.7 billion. He said he's holding it. He has said he likes it and does not have any plans to trade it. We haven't seen anything that would make me think he's not sticking to that for the time being.
What could he be using this money for? Because $3.4 billion is a tremendous amount of money, and we've talked about his legal woes before, his trouble with the building on 40 Wall Street. What could he be using this for?
Exactly those items. He could be. He has about $570 million in legal liabilities in New York State. He could pay that off by selling some of these shares. He has mortgages at 40 Wall Street and Trump Tower that are around the $100 million range. He could pay those off as well and still have a sizable chunk of change left over if he chose to do that.
So let's say Trump does eventually decide to dump his shares. Does this render Truth Social worthless? What would that do to the value of the company?
Well, obviously, supply and demand. You would start to see a massive supply of shares if he did put some of them out there. So it would stand to reason that the stock price should go down, but it also should stand to reason that the stock price shouldn't be as high as it is right now, just based up purely on its financials. So who knows? There may be a uptick from MAGA supporters who are, we need to buy these stocks right now to help out Donald Trump because, the liberal Democrats are going after him and he has to pay this fine and all this stuff. So, who knows?
Well, certainly a lot to look out for, but per usual, Zach Everson, we are glad you were looking out for us. Thanks so much for your reporting.
My pleasure. Thank you, Brittany.